Today we welcome Professor Janeen Baxter. Welcome, Janeen. So Janeen needs no introduction, but I'm just going to read out a few of your achievements, Janeen. Janeen has a long history of contributions actually in social science, research including critical topics like social disadvantage, gender inequality, family dynamics, life course, and longitudinal studies. You're the director of the Australian Research Council Centre of Excellence for Children and Families over the life course in the Institute for Social Science Research here at the University of Queensland. Janeen is widely known in the international research community, serving on several editorial boards for national and international journals, has been a member and chair of the ARC College of Experts. Janeen is an elected fellow of the Academy of Social Science in Australia and a former member of its executive committee. You've also been serving on several government advisory committees, research advisory boards, including the Expert Advisory Board for the Singapore Longitudinal Early Development Study. So welcome, Janeen.
Thank you.
So let us start by talking a little bit about the types of data, the kinds of data that you have encountered in your research. Tell us about that, and also how the access to this data has opened new opportunities for you or new outcomes from your work.
So I've used a wide range of different kinds of data. Both very small scale data were based on in-depth interviews with small numbers of people, 10 or 20 in the sample. I've also used large national cross-sectional surveys, which survey thousands of people. And most recently, a lot of the data I use is longitudinal. And by that we mean data that's collected on the same sample of people repeatedly. So one of the data sets that I've used a lot in my research is the Households, Income and Labour Dynamics in Australia survey. It's a large-scale panel survey which commenced in 2000 with a sample of about 7,000 households. Everyone in the household over the age of 15 is interviewed, and they're interviewed every year. So that gives you a really rich picture of longitudinal patterns and life course stages that people go through. And as director of the Centre of Excellence for Children and Families over the life course, I am very interested in life course patterns and outcomes, and that does require longitudinal data so that we can sort of watch and track how people navigate through particular life course events. And then the outcomes of different pathways on their well-being over time.
That certainly sheds light on the collection mechanisms for longitudinal data over the life course. Tell us a little bit about the curation challenges. So once this data is collected, to the time that it's ready for analysis, what sort of workflows and pathways and challenges that you face in that part of research?
I mean, one of the challenges with longitudinal data, of course, is that you need to wait quite a long time until the data are collected. If you want to look at life course outcomes across the whole life course, say from birth right through to old age, you've got to wait a lifetime for that data to be ready. So we often use retrospective data where we ask people about previous events in their life course. But of course, that's subject to recall bias and various errors. So the prospective longitudinal data where we're kind of tracking people over time from year to year is really terrific. But it does take a long time to get the data to be able to look at some of those long-term life course outcomes. One of the other challenges that we face with the data is that often the very groups that we're most interested in are not in the data sets. So again, in the Life Course Centre that I'm leading, we are particularly focused on understanding how disadvantage accrues over the life course and across generations. And so we're particularly interested in populations that suffer deep and persistent disadvantage, so people who are have long periods of unemployment or homelessness. And those kinds of very disadvantaged people are often not in these data sets. They're either not recruited in the first place, or if they are, they often drop out and they're hard to track and follow over time. So one of the things that we have turned to in the centre is to start using administrative data that are collected by governments and organisations on those populations. So, for example, data that's collected in order to deliver welfare payments, for example, in Australia, collect basic information around people's family situations, their employment, their housing, their health. And so that gives us a very rich picture of these specific populations that we are most interested in, the ones who are, disadvantaged in one way or another. But if the challenge there is that there are many challenges with those kinds of data. They're not collected for research. They're data that's collected to deliver payments or services. So they're not easy to access or use. And Australia is going through a number of, developing a number of legislative changes at the moment to make some of those data available to researchers. And so we are kind of moving forward, but again, it's slow. And then when we do get the data, we need to access it in very sensitive ways that protect privacy and confidentiality, and ensure that we have the social license to use those kinds of data to undertake research and feedback for policy. So there's a number of challenges. I think all data have different pros and cons, and depending on the research question that you're focusing on, different data will be suitable for different needs.
Yes, I do want to, follow up a little bit on what you said around repurposing of data. So from social science, we know that the data collection instruments are very robust and they are validated in a variety of ways. So the data that is collected or created as a result of those instruments is known to be of high quality. But when you are joining that data up with other data sets that are being repurposed, a whole new set of challenges do emerge from there. So particularly around data sharing, you shed some light there. But around data linkage, what are your experiences there?
That is a very, very challenging area. So we work with some accredited data linkage authorities like the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the Commonwealth Department of Social Services, and the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare. They are the authorised data linking authorities in Australia. And so if we are looking for access to linked data, we must go through those agencies in order to access the data. And they have their own ethics processes and procedures that they need to go through in order to link that data in confidential and appropriate ways for research. So we address those kinds of challenges by working with agencies that have the authority, the legislative authority, plus the methodological skills and experience to link data in an appropriate way. And then, for any research project that we do, of course, we would also go through appropriate ethics procedures here at UQ and ensure that all of our researchers, follow those procedures, very carefully. So there's a number of steps. And one of the challenges, again, is just the time it can take to link data and access it, given the procedures that you need to go through. It's also becoming increasingly expensive. So often these authorities charge, very high prices to link data and make it available. So that's another challenge for researchers in order to meet those costs.
Yes. I mean, we hear about this statistic, which is quite commonly cited in our community of data scientists, that 80% of their time is spent on linking, transforming, cleaning, filtering, annotating, those kind of tasks on the data, rather than actually trying to derive some insight from that. So I think your story is quite aligned with the experiences of many. Yeah.
And the other thing that we do, of course, is the Life Course Centre is very multidisciplinary. So we work very closely with a whole range of different disciplines, including data scientists and people with machine learning skills, to try and bring those kinds of skills into our research questions. And so that kind of multidisciplinary approach does mean that, we've got a range of different researchers with different skills to bring together to all tackle the same problem, and that does work very well, because it does mean that we can draw on the skills that other people have with working with some of these data sets, which particularly when we're talking about administrative data, they're very large data sets. They may be on whole populations. The data may be collected and updated every fortnight, so there's millions and millions of records. So they're very large data sets that require skills that sometimes social scientists don't have, and so we work with our engineering and data science colleagues to help us use the data in order to answer the research questions.
Couldn't agree more on the collaborative approach to these really complex global problems. And glad that you touched upon the skill side of things as well. So to finish off, I'd love to ask you your opinion and your experience on the kind of skills that people need to have, not just within computer science, but more generally, anybody working in data-intensive domains, and especially our future research leaders, our PhD students. What is your advice for them? What sort of skills they need to develop?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Look, I think, my training is in sociology, and of course, as a sociologist, I was trained in certain kinds of survey design and data collection methods, but that was many years ago, and there's been a lot of changes and developments since then. So one piece of advice for, say, early career researchers coming through now is to keep updating your skills, because, the technology, the data that's available is changing so rapidly. So there's so much new data, naturally occurring data, from, Facebook sites, for example, as well as surveys, administrative data that we've touched on. Some of the projects that we're doing in the centre are collecting data on using actigraphs that people wear to collect information about their daily movements, their sleep cycles, their heart rate. So there's a whole range of data. So I guess my first piece of advice would be to keep up to date and to keep flexible about, what kinds of data and methods that you might need to use. The other piece of advice I would give, and this is probably a little bit, left field maybe, is to be very open to working across disciplines and also working with partners outside of academia. And again, I think making sure that our research is impactful and engaged. So, some of the research that we do, we may be very interested in from an academic point of view, but if it's not going to have an impact, or if it's not of relevance or interest to people in the outside world, then I think that's really a shame. So the other piece of advice I would give is to stay in touch and to work closely with partners and stakeholders outside academia, community organisations or government or whoever your stakeholders are, to shape your research in ways that help them to achieve their goals.
That is very good advice. Thank you so much, Janeen, for taking the time to talk to us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Shazia.